and welcome to Introduction to the HCBS-DD Waiver. My name is Carol Meredith. I'm the Executive Director here at the ARC Arapahoe and Douglas. And I have to do a little bit of introductory stuff here. So this presentation is an introduction to understanding the HCBS-DD waiver in Colorado. We've done our best to ensure accuracy of the information you're about to hear as of July 2016. The ARC of Arapahoe and Douglas is providing this video as a public service to families, but you need to decide what is right for you. The ARC of Arapahoe and Douglas is a private, nonprofit membership organization that exists to better the lives of people with developmental disabilities and their families. We are not a government agency. We provide advocacy, information, education, and support to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. Okay, so let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about the HCBS-DD waiver. It is also known as the comp waiver, the comprehensive waiver, or the residential waiver. And this waiver is for persons with developmental disabilities and provides people with developmental disabilities supports and services that allow them to continue living in the community. Okay, so let's look at the criteria for HCBS-DD. To qualify for the DD waiver, you are the person applying, so your son or daughter, or if you're a self-advocate, you have to meet the following criteria. Be 18 years or older, need extensive supports to live safely in the community, including access to 24-hour supervision, and do not have other resources to meet those needs. You have to meet the medical criteria, which is basically having an intellectual or developmental disability as defined by the state of Colorado. You have to be residing in or at risk of residing in an intermediate care facility for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That's called a level of care. You must be determined to have a developmental disability like we talked about. You have to meet the financial criteria. And the financial criteria is the income must be 300% or less of the supplemental security income allowance per month. So for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they have to have countable resources of less than $2,000 for a single person or $3,000 for a couple. So you have to be fairly poor to be able to access this waiver. Now, before we get into the sort of the nuts and bolts of the waiver, one of the things we always like to do is help you think about your son or daughter, or think about your own needs. So what does your son or daughter want to accomplish in life? What services do they need to get there? Can they be left alone at home for any portion of the day or night? What will they be doing during the day? Can they do any of this alone? Will HCBS-DD services enhance their quality of life? So currently, there's a long waiting list for this particular waiver in Colorado because it's very expensive. So in order to get on this waiver, you need to think about this carefully. And you need to know that you may not, even if you do have this high level of need, you may not be able to get the waiver right away or immediately unless it's an emergency. So, if your son or daughter cannot spend time alone, how will they be supervised or cared for if the waiver can't cover all the hours when parents or natural supports are unavailable or working. Even with the HCBS comprehensive waiver, even though you have access to 24 hours of support, that doesn't mean that you'll necessarily have 24/7 support with you all the time. So that needs to be worked out. If your son or daughter has a hard time expressing their preferences, think about what experiences would be helpful for people to observe, to guess about their preferences. Think about environments. Are busy, noisy environments good, or are they bad? Does your son or daughter thrive with predictable routines and schedules, or do they really do better with surprises and novelty in their life? Everybody's different. Everybody has different needs, even though they all have the same label according to the state. So it's important to think about your son or daughter. So what about medical needs? Allergies, skilled nursing care, stamina, activity levels. What about sensory issues? Lighting, noise, temperature, colors. What about mental health needs? Are behavioral services needed? Do they need access to a psychiatrist? What does your son or does your son or daughter have a really strong work ethic? Do they like to be busy all day or not? Maybe they like to hang out and observe. Maybe they like to have a quiet life and don't want to be busy and engaged in tasks all day. These are differences that are neither good nor bad, but they are differences and need to be thought about. How about, does your son or daughter like to help other people or not? Do they love animals or not? Just things to think about. Okay, I promised the nuts and bolts. Here they are. These are the services that are available through this particular waiver, okay? We talked about behavioral services. Behavioral services are available through this waiver. They're provided by people that are certified not certified by, but Colorado has determined who's qualified to provide these behavioral services. And they're typically taking and shaping behaviors that maybe seem not quite appropriate, and shaping and finding replacement behaviors that are appropriate in socially acceptable environments. Dehabilitation. Dehabilitation is a covered service. You might have heard of it as something called a day program. There's two different kinds of day program services in Colorado right now. One is called specialized HAB. That's typically where a person goes to a facility or stays at home, and somebody comes in and provides specialized day services to that individual that'll help them build skills. There's also supported community connections. Supported community connections is where people go out into the community with supervision and support by staff. And they do things like, go to concerts, go to the zoo, go to the park, go to the library, a variety of different activities out in the community. Through that particular service, you can have a combination of both. You don't need to pick one or the other. You can do a little bit of each, or whatever works best for your son or daughter. Dental. Currently, Colorado, through state plan Medicaid, does have a dental benefit. However, it is limited. So if your son or daughter has a lot of dental needs, you would be able to access services over and above, dental services over and above what's provided by the state plan through the waiver. Non-medical transportation. There are limits on non-medical transportation throughout the waiver. Typically, people use non-medical transportation to go back and forth to a day program, specialized HAB, wherever. Pre-vocational services. Pre-vocational services are time limited, they're goal directed, they're typically provided in a facility kind of situation where you're learning how to work, or you're learning the skills that you need to learn to get a real job in the community. Residential habilitation, this is 24-hour, individual or group. Now remember, I said it's access to 24-hour support. Sometimes a person is capable of being alone for a portion of the day, as long as they have access to staff by cell phone, or they may be right down the hall at an apartment program or something like that. Some people need one-on-one, 24-hour, 7 days a week support. That's also available through this waiver. Residential services encompass a lot of things, so like personal care, hygiene, bathing, dressing, eating, shopping, budgeting, money management, laundry, housekeeping, all of those kinds of things that all of us do every day to live in our house. Those are included in residential services. Also, what do you do in downtime? Well, residential services can provide supervision and support for what the rest of us do. You know, reading a book, watching TV, playing a game, going to church, whatever that might be for your son or daughter. The next service is specialized medical equipment and supplies. Now, State Plan Medicaid provides a lot of services and medical services and supplies, but some of it doesn't cover. So this is stuff like chucks and wipes for people who have toileting and diapering kinds of things that they need support with. Supported employment. This is a service that supports someone who has a job or who wants to get a job. So it can be job development, and it can also be somebody that's there to supervise and support an individual during their job hours. It can be used to help problem solve with managers or supervisors. Supported employment is really just what it sounds like. It's support for someone who is in an employment situation. Vision. This Colorado State Plan Medicaid has a very limited vision benefit. So if your son or daughter wears glasses or contacts or needs those kinds of things, they can be paid for through the waiver. All right, so now we're going to move on to funding. We want you to understand how the funding mechanism works for this waiver, because it may help you make some important decisions and prioritize your needs. So once your son or daughter is offered a waiver resource through the HCBS-DD waiver, if they haven't already done one, they will be required to go through an assessment called the Supports Intensity Scale. Now, we have another video already available, so we're not going to go in depth on the SIS, which is what everybody calls it. But know that that assessment will need to occur. It's an evidence-based norm reference tool that was developed by AAIDD, which is the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And it was developed to measure the level of supports a person needs. So a person with IDD, it measures the support that they need to live in the community independently. So it measures that gap, how much support they might need to live the way typical people live in the community. So Colorado has chosen to use this tool to determine rates for services provided through SLS and the HCBS-DD waivers. So it's only used for the adult IDD waivers in Colorado, and there are two of them, supported living services, and the one we're talking about today, HCBS-DD. So Colorado has chosen to use this tool in the HCBS-DD waiver. So now we're going to go to figuring out the budget. It's important for you to understand that just like everything else in life, there's only so much money to pay for all this stuff that this waiver provides, okay? So your SIS level is going to help you to understand what the rates are going to be paid to providers. Unlike SLS, the budget for HCBS-DD is whatever the person needs. So as you're doing your service plan, you will determine how much service the person needs. But the higher the SIS score, the higher the rates are going to be paid to the providers that provide that service. So if you're a level 2, the rate may be like $10 an hour. If you're a level 6, the rate might be $20 an hour. And Colorado has chosen to do this because we have determined through this, using the SIS, the Supports Intensity Scale, that people with higher levels of need sometimes require higher levels of support from the provider. So they're paying the provider more to provide those services. So the home health benefit typically pays for certified nursing assistants, RNs, LPNs, nursing care. So this is pretty highly skilled medical care. Under the Home and Community-Based Services waiver, the rates have been constructed so that CNA level of care or certified nursing assistant level of care is included in the residential rate. So you cannot get CNA care over and above the amount of residential services that you would get, unless it's a rehabilitation situation. So if somebody goes into the hospital and has their knee replaced or whatever, and they need a CNA level of care to come in for short-term rehab of that knee, you can sometimes get that along with the nursing. Now, RN level of care is negotiable, and I encourage you to contact us if that's your situation, because that typically becomes a negotiated rate with the department. So that's how skilled nursing care or Medicaid state plan home health works. And I'm sure lots of you have questions about, where's this person going to live, right? Under the HCBS-DD waiver, there's several different kinds of housing that's available. But this housing and all the stuff that's accompanied by housing, so your internet rates or your utilities from Excel, all of those kinds of things, are supposed to be paid for out of the person's Social Security benefit. So SSI or SSDI is supposed to be paying for food, clothing, and shelter. When you contract for residential services through an agency, you will be required, or the individual will be required, to pay room and board. Those room and board rates are determined by the department each year. But basically, they take most of what SSI provides, except for like $75 a month that the person has available to them to pay for their own personal needs, like going out to a movie or renting a video or going out to McDonald's or whatever, those kinds of things. Okay, so back to the housing. There are things called apartment programs These are typically for people who are fairly independent. An agency will set up a situation where maybe 5 to 10 people with intellectual or developmental disabilities are living in an apartment by themselves if they can afford it because of their SSI and maybe their income from a job, or they may be living with a roommate. There will be a staff apartment located in the apartment complex, and staff will be available to that person 24 hours a day. So they could either call them on their cell phone or go down to the staff apartment and get assistance if they needed it. Many of you probably know about group homes. Group homes are typically run by an agency. There's typically 6 to 8 people with developmental disabilities who are living in a home that is staffed by an agency, and there will be staff there 24 hours a day to assist them with meal prep and laundry and hygiene and all of those kinds of things. Another option available is called a host home. A host home is like adult foster care. This is where an individual, a family, a couple, whoever, decide that they want to open up their home and provide host home services to an individual with developmental disabilities. Now, they can provide services to 1, 2, or 3 people with developmental disabilities in their home. They contract with an agency to do this, but they provide all of the residential services for that individual. Another option could be services in the family home. So the services, the HCBS-DD services are provided within a family home. So someone would come in and provide the services to the individual who qualifies for comprehensive or HCBS-DD services, maybe 8 to 10 hours a day, maybe less, depending upon their CIS level. So as you can see, there's a lot of different ways to put all this together, and that's why we go through that part in the beginning of this video where you think about who is your son or daughter. Could they live with 8 different people in a group home? Would that be a good place for them to live? Or do they need a smaller environment? Would they be capable of living in an apartment program because they work most of the time or part-time and have some income coming in and would be able to pay for an apartment? Or would a host home work best for them? Would they thrive in more of a family environment? As always, the choice is up to you. Think it through. And if you have any questions, please call us. Thank you.